What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I'm excited for this episode. I've been getting a lot of requests about property. So I thought what I'll do is I will wrap up this property as it has finally been sold. So this was the one that I'd done the other video on. It fell through 3 times. It was really complicated, but with some creative thinking from my brother, I have learned something very, very valuable, and I wanted to share that with you as well. So those of you in the property space, you can learn something from it. So in this space, I'm learning so much. Even though I've been around property for a while, there's always new things that I may not understand that I get to learn from. So I'm growing massively, and I thought I'd share this message with you all and kind of go into the numbers so you can understand the bigger picture, how it all happened, how it went down. Good news is, they love the property, they're moving in next week, they'll both be tied off, all will be done, and we'll be moving on to another project. So it's really crucial in these times that you don't get too caught up into things like, oh, hoping things are gonna play out. You need to know when to pivot, when to make a decision, when to cut your losses, and when to do different things. I've learned that massively in my life, so let's get into the numbers. So I mapped this out on the whiteboard for you guys. Let's take a look. So what we have here is proposed value and actual. So this was how it was meant to go down. So this is our ideal scenario here. So I'm going to go through the figures. Ideally, you want to be aiming for around 20% as a standard. So let's say you have something that's going to cost, let's say, for example, $1 million, right? The whole thing costs $1 million. You want at least 20% in that. So let's say 200K. That is what you want to be aiming for. In an ideal world, that happens, but not always. So let's take a look. So here we have the land. So we've got 300K. So 300K plus the build, 450. So then we're looking at 750. So 750 for the build, but the GDV is 900. So what does that leave us with? That leaves us with 150K profit, but then we've got the interest to factor in, which is 40K. So then we've got net 110. Now over a 6-month period, this is looking good because from a 6-month period, that's good to have these type of deals. Now, sometimes they're going to be bigger than that as well. So again, it's going back to the ideal scenario, but things don't always go smoothly. So we've had, COVID-19, all kinds of things. So really, a really complicated blend of difficult things all at once, but we've still managed to come up on top. So let's go into what actually happened. So same figures, 300, then we've got 450, but then with all of the sale price, rather than getting the 900, we still managed to get 885. So not quite at the 900, but close enough, it's still decent. So then we're going to this part, which we've got, instead of 150 profit, which we estimated, it's 135. Then we take away the interest that is now no longer 40, we're now at 88. What does that leave us with? 47 versus 110. So in an ideal scenario, we're looking at 110K profit, 6 months, perfect. In actuality, it takes 15 months, £47,000 profit. Now you might be thinking, how on earth did we get to 88,000 of interest versus 40? So this is what happens. It's not always going to be convenient. So sometimes if you funded this completely yourself, which we can do, then of course you don't have to worry about the interest. You've got a little bit more time, you've got more bargaining power, you can sit on things you can hold, you don't need to drop the prices. People always want a deal, they knock the price ever so slightly. You accept that in this industry. But what you've got to understand is that if your money is tied up and then another deal comes along like this and it's not convenient, and then you don't have the liquid available cash, then guess what? You leverage banks, you leverage different investors, and then you use that money. So you have to pay the interest. So essentially what was happening is that every single month that when it kept falling through, kept going over, people find a different property, people mess you around, it happens. This was going on and on and on. So essentially what's happening, this profit is eating into your profit. So the interest, if you wait and wait and wait, before you know it, well, look at the difference, £48,000 in extra interest. Think about that. Can you stomach that? Are you going to live in this hope that, oh, it might sell? And then what people tend to do, especially in the property industry, they can't pivot, they can't do anything different, so they just sit on it thinking, well, I want this amount of money for it and I'm just going to sit on it until then. And before you know it, it eats into all of the profit. So going back to this, so 47, bit of a kick in the teeth when you expect to have 110K, but again, comes down to your expectations. You have to be flexible and realize this is ideal, this is the actuality. Now, it's not always like this, it can be incredibly well. But with this, what are the pitfalls that you can look at? Well, solicitors, they take too long. Anyone in the property game knows this. People are constantly frustrated at it. That's not something you can really control in that respect. So solicitors took too long. And again, this fell through 3 times, guys, 3 times. With COVID-19, As you know, they weren't releasing the funds. It was very, very difficult. And again, things break down. So someone else has got to wait for someone to do this and wait for that. And when you've got the chain involved, it can get complicated. So you think, right, all done and dusted. And then before you know it, someone's pulling out. Some things you can't control, but it tends to balance out throughout the year. So in this scenario, even though it worked out reasonably well, it could have gone the other way. It could have gone into break even or even the negative, but you're probably wondering, so how did it happen? How did the deal happen? What was the creative thinking behind it? Well, this is what you came for in the video, and I think this is going to be the key thing. A scenario came up in which that there was an opportunity to part exchange. And you might think, well, how can you do that? Well, it's not something that a lot of people explore. So by part exchanging, so this was a house, this was a 3-bed house, end of terrace. Bear in mind, we're in a bungalow here, and this is more in the countryside. It has to be very desirable. The amenities are not going to be as, exclusive as things closer towards London, for example, the train lines and all those kind of things. So you have to really want to live in this area, and you have to want a bungalow. So it narrows down, and bungalows in this area are pretty desirable, to be honest. So it was a good idea in the first place. But however, if you can get top money for this property, so full price for the property that we had, and then as a part exchange, a 3-bed end of terrace in a different area, which would sell much quicker, bearing in mind that we got that under the market value for around just under 25k. So under the market value, under 25,000, able to get that part exchange. So you got the full price now, this is sold, and then you've got another property that you can sell much quicker, a lot easier for first-time buyers, things like that. It's a 3-bed end of terrace in a reasonably nice area. It's a lot easier to get that done. So what's happened there, we're able to pivot, do all of that, and then end up with 47k profit. Now, what would have been the difference? Imagine that we just sat on it for longer and longer. That would have gone down, but before you know it, 88 is sitting at 100, 112, 100. I mean, how long do you wait until you realize it's eating into all of our profit? So it's about understanding you need to know when to make a decision. It's not always easy, like I completely get it. I mean, even when I look at the board, I'm looking at the figures thinking it would have been so much easier, but the key thing with this was I would rather get the money out, be able to get the capital back, and then be able to go into another deal that's actually presented itself. It's sometimes better to cut your losses to have that capital to be able to invest elsewhere. That's the key thing about it. So the creative thinking behind that was just part exchange, get it done. It's a lot easier to sell a 3-bed end of terrace than it is in this area when you have to really want to live in this area. So do you see what I mean by that? Let me know if you resonate with that. Let me know if you've done things in the past, for those of you in the property space where you've had to pivot, had to do different things. It's not always going to go smooth. So for all of you asking, how can I get into property? Look, I can't give you that advice. I'm not a property developer, as say, I'm an investor. Yes, I have a lot of experience, but there's so many different things that can happen. What I recommend is that if you want to learn about property, it's good to jump on the back of different people. So if you can get involved even in a small way, invest a little bit of capital, but then you can negotiate and be able to actually, the proposal would be you get to see insights into it. So let's say you invest into it and you can see every step of the way. Just keep learning, keep learning, keep learning until you're in a position that maybe you want to run a few developments on your own. Maybe you want to do a few different things on your own. But don't think about the profit and the money just yet. If you're earlier on in the stages, you've got to learn all these things, because these mistakes can be very, very costly. But with experience, having professional people around you, then it can help out massively. I'm very grateful that I've got my brother who's got tons of experience, who does this on a regular basis. I've been able to see that for years and years and years. It rub off on me, invest, be more hands-on than a typical investor, and then be able to be involved in these projects, which is really, really rewarding, and another income stream. Got to be thinking bigger. You can't just, it astounds me by how many people are still just making money to then just either save it or spend it, and they don't invest anything. They think that I've just got this one source of income and that should be fine. You've got to look at bigger things and expand things that you're interested in. Property's been huge for me. I love it, and it's probably just because I've grown up around it, to be honest, but it's been massive. But very happy with the deal. But I thought I would go through this with you guys, showcase the difference between how that could have been very, very different. That 88 could have risen to like 110, 112, and it gets sickening, especially over a 15-month period. Before you know it, you're thinking, if only if I would have just cut my losses, if only if I would have just maybe reduced the price and got out of it. You need to ask yourself the question, is it better to take, let's say, 10k less on a property? Let's say you might own a property right now and you're trying to sell it, right? Your property is worth 500k, that's what you want for it. Sometimes it's better to take 480, get your money back out, and then utilize that money into something else, rather than just because you've set this random figure of Well, I want to sell it for 500 and that's what I think it's worth. It doesn't matter what you think it's worth. It's what the market's worth. It's what people are willing to pay. And this is where in business, you have to be thick-skinned. You've got to learn to pivot. Not everything goes smoothly. But in a different scenario, you've got 2 or 3 projects running at 20%, for example, you're aiming for that 20% profit, you know, 200K at a time, you've got 600K out there. So there's a lot more that can happen. There's a lot of upside, a lot of benefits that when you've got multiple projects running, but just understand that they're not always going to go smoothly. But this one took longer, but it taught me so many lessons. And I think that's the message that I want to get across. Everything that you do for like the first 5 years, especially if you're a 20-year-old right now, or even 22, 23, from your 20s to your 30s, it's an experiment. You're going to learn so much. It's not about focusing on becoming a multi-millionaire. Can it happen? Yes, of course it does, but don't be too hard on yourself if a few projects don't go well. But the most important thing you can do is try. But if you want to get further in life, leverage people that are much further along in the journey from you. Even if you have to take less profit, you get to see the whole experience. And that's what I've done. And now I've leveled up because of that. So it's been huge. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know if you'd want even more detail on some properties. We've got an incredible one coming up, which is much larger units. And ideally, I would actually like to take you through more of a start to finish so you can see from the ground all the way up. Let me know if you'd like to see more of that kind of transformation. And as always, thank you for tuning into the content. If you're just joining this channel for the first time, it's not just about property. I'm covering all areas of my life, whether it be in foreign exchange, whether it be other projects that I do, whether it be other projects like property, like this, and just day-to-day life stuff and mindset things and routines that just a hub that you can come back, get inspired, take some valuable practical tips away and apply in your day-to-day life. So hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your #1 takeaway. Speak to you guys and girls very, very soon. Take care, everyone.